Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020. Ever since I updated my MacBook, it pretty much starts the videos a lot later. It gives me a 5-second countdown and then an additional 3 seconds before the recording actually starts. So I've noticed that in my past two videos, they pretty much cut off. It also has really messed up my microphone. So if you're not hearing this, it's probably not uploaded, obviously. But if it is uploaded, that means the microphone actually worked correctly. I uploaded a video yesterday discussing the pathways for, or not the pathways, just the likeliest scenarios for the 2020 election. And both times I recorded 15-minute long videos and they were both corrupted based off the audio. So it was really unfortunate. So I just decided that I couldn't really update that for the night. If you're wondering what's bouncing on the bottom of the screen, I can't stop it right now. It would just mess up the screen recording because it's focused on my Google Chrome, but somehow it lets the icons bump up. But they're pretty much just my video editing softwares, if you're wondering what that is. I know it's a little bit annoying, so in the future I'll go ahead and turn that off. So today we're talking about the future of the Democratic Party and what I actually envision for them as we progress through the next couple of election cycles. So I don't think that too many states will change. Let's go ahead and get the logo up here, standard, whatever. I don't think too many states are going to really change fundamentally. A lot of these states will likely have a very Republican or Democratic identity within the next couple of decades. If we take a look at the election maps from 1992 to now, some states definitely have changed. Arkansas went from being a solid blue state to now being a solid red state. But some states have also remained with their Republican and Democratic identities. California remained safe for the Democratic Party. Idaho remained safe for the Republican Party. A lot of states never really ended up flipping following the 1992 election. There are a number of states that have been the same since then, or even the year 2000, which I think is a better representation of modern politics. The Democrats still haven't won a single state in the actual South outside of Florida and North Carolina. Pretty much the entire Bible Belt is safe for the GOP. And the Democratic Party definitely could target it in the future, which is what we're going to be talking about in this video. So when I say the future of the Democratic Party, I really mean the future of the country. Whether Republicans like it or not, the country is going to become bluer. As we reach 2040, 2050, there will be a point in time where the minority population will eventually become the majority. I know that sounds like a paradox, but it actually makes sense. Minority voters are not all grouped together. There's black voters, Asian voters, all types of voters. If they're not white, they're considered minorities, right? So when we say minority voters will become the majority, we don't just mean one individual race. So there won't be a majority. There will be a composition of a number of minority voters altogether that will overall be more than 50% of the country. Right now, it's around 60% white in this nation. So, when we're talking about, I guess you could say white, not mixed voters, but altogether, white voters typically make up the majority of the electorate in most states. I know there's some states like New Mexico that have a majority minority population, which again, that sounds very weird. It's really funny. But it will be a very real reality for the future of this nation. So as a bunch of states start to increase their minority voting groups, whether that's through legal immigration or just movements from certain regions in this country, we're going to talk about where I truly believe the future of the Democratic Party lies and what I would consider to be target states. I know I made a video talking about which states the Biden campaign should target for 2020. You're going to see some states on here that I would consider to be, future states, but I guess you could say I'm just calling them target states because that's where I think the Democratic Party is going to have their electoral presence within the next couple of elections. But obviously, things don't always end up being true, and electoral trends definitely can change. But as it stands right now, it looks like the Democratic Party absolutely will be dominating in future elections if current political party policies stand. So when we're looking at these 231 toss-up electoral votes, there actually are going to be some states that I consider to be Democratic states and safe Republican states right now that I will consider to be target states for the Democratic Party. I think that the Democratic Party likely will focus all of their efforts following the 2020 election in these southern states, the entire Sun Belt region. I think that the Democratic Party really does see a future in this area, and I wholeheartedly agree. Looking at where the demographic shifts are happening around the country, we're seeing an influx of minority voters in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Florida, in South Carolina, in Mississippi, in Texas, in New Mexico, in Colorado, in Arizona, in Nevada. And while the Democratic Party may not be able to capture some of these states in 2020, or maybe even 2024, these states will absolutely be future Democratic strongholds if current demographic shifts stand, and it doesn't look like they're going to change much. The Democratic Party likely will lose some support, though, across Rust Belt states, which we will characterize soon. I wouldn't necessarily characterize them as target states, per se. I don't think the Democratic Party really has to hold on to much in the Rust Belt in order to win future elections. Looking at the entire electoral presence of the Sun Belt, it's growing in population and growing more Democrat. This area is decreasing in population and growing more Republican. That comes as a result of minority voters leaving Milwaukee or leaving Detroit. And not to say only minority voters live in those cities, but urban voters typically vote Democrat. They're usually comprised of majority minority communities. So if they're moving out of Milwaukee down to Atlanta, or if they're moving from Detroit to go to Phoenix, well, Arizona will gain more Democratic voters. Michigan will lose them. So the main reason why these Rust Belt states and a lot of these states in the South actually end up going blue or are expected to go blue in 2020 is because of these big cities. Phoenix is actually, I believe, the fastest growing city in this country. Arizona is expected to gain an electoral vote. Texas is expected to gain 3. Colorado is expected to gain 1. Florida is expected to gain 2. North Carolina is expected to gain 1. So a lot of these states that are growing in, minority voters are also growing in electoral presence. So these states will no longer be relevant for the Democratic Party to actually hold on to. We definitely could see some of these states become more Republican as we start to see. Pennsylvania went, I believe, 21 electoral votes in 2008, 20 now, and is expected to drop down to 19 following the 2020 census. So let's go ahead and characterize some of these states. I wouldn't necessarily characterize Virginia as a target state for the Democratic Party. A lot of the reason why Virginia goes to the Democratic Party is not because of minority voters. They definitely make a huge impact on it, especially in the Northern Virginia region. But you also have to take into account that Virginia defies a lot of national standards. A lot of the rich white suburban voters, which have voted for the Republicans in the past and very well did before Obama, have since become Democratic lockdowns. We're looking at congressional districts that were Republican prior to 2018 that are now safe for the Democratic Party. So a lot of the races that we see in Virginia, they defy a lot of national expectations. You expect, richer voters to vote for Republicans, except for maybe the top 1%, but looking at a lot of the upper class, they typically do vote for the Republican Party. The middle class and lower class typically vote around even middle class, and then for the Democrats, in terms of the lower class, I guess if you're looking at the economic scale, obviously there are some exceptions, and Virginia is definitely one of them. So Virginia, I wouldn't say is a target state. I think it'll be a Democratic stronghold for the next couple of elections. I don't think New Hampshire will be a target state either. I'm only characterizing these states how I see them going in 2020. But when we look at these future states that the Democratic Party absolutely should be jumping on and focusing on, you'll see what I mean as we go through the map. So, looking at this overall electoral map, I think that the Democratic Party will carry Minnesota. I don't think that'll be a problem for them. I don't think they'll have too much of an issue carrying the Rust Belt either. But I don't see too much of a future for Democrats in these 3 states. Yes, they will likely hold on to some Democrat incumbents in the Senate, some Democrats in the House of Representatives. Obviously, there are Democrats in the South as well from, Mississippi or Alabama. I just think that as we look at where the trends are going, number one, these 3 Rust Belt states have always been competitive. The only reason why people said that Hillary Clinton, lost a huge loss was because Obama won these states very solidly. If we don't compare Hillary to Obama, she actually performed about as good as John Kerry and Al Gore. So both of them only narrowly won these states, and yes, Hillary Clinton lost them, so she did underperform them, but she was not supposed to. She should not have won them by double-digit margins. Obama was a very specific one-in-a-lifetime candidate. I know I say that a lot, but it's true. He was able to flip solid Republican states like Indiana and flip, I believe Virginia for the first time since Jimmy Carter, or it was either Jimmy Carter or 1964, but I know for a fact that Indiana went blue for the first time in a very long time. He made states like North and South Dakota competitive. So Obama definitely did something very different. I don't think we should compare Hillary's performance to Obama's. I think we definitely should be comparing it to previous Democrats who didn't do so well, because you aren't supposed to absolutely obliterate your Republican opponent in the Rust Belt. We see that in statewide races as well, even with popular incumbents like Debbie Stabenow. The only exception may be Amy Klobuchar in 2018. So these 3 states, I still think Biden will win, but I don't see too much of a future for the Democrats here, especially with a lot of the population from these 3 states alone moving down into states in this Sun Belt region. We're seeing a very huge influx of voters, not only from America, but outside of the country, that regardless of where they come from, immigrant voters typically split, 60-40 depending on the region, but overall for the Democratic Party, a net gain for them. So target states, there are pretty obvious ones. Texas, absolutely. These 38 electoral votes will definitely be competitive in future elections, and the Democratic Party likely could contest every single statewide race we see here. They gave up the 2014 governor race despite having a very good candidate. They gave up a lot of their elections in the past. So Texas was the first time Democrats truly contested it was in 2018. And they did very well. When I say truly contested it, obviously there's a Democratic Party in Texas. There's always been a state party. There's always been that speculation, can Texas turn blue? And a lot of people equated it to the question, can California turn red? The answer is no for California, but the answer is yes for Texas. While California moves further to the left, Texas moves further to the left as well. Unfortunately for the GOP, their California has now turned purple, and will absolutely be a major point for the Democrats in future elections. I also think that Georgia and South Carolina and Mississippi, I think Mississippi and South Carolina will be perfect representations as to whether or not the Democrats can drive up turnout amongst African-American voters. I don't expect either of these states, South Carolina or Mississippi, to go to Joe Biden on Election Day, but they have a very large African-American population that, if numbers tend to rise. South Carolina is expected to turn purple sometime around 2028, 2032. Mississippi has the largest by percent African-American population in this country, behind D.C., but in terms of states, Mississippi. And if the Democrats are able to drive up turnout amongst African-American voters, we could see maybe a 10-point margin somewhere. I believe Obama lost to Romney in this state by 10 points, though Hillary Clinton lost it by 19%. So, when we're talking about driving up black turnout, I think that these states are very good indicators for the future of the Democratic Party in terms of getting the representation in a lot of these southern states. I don't think that the states like Arkansas and Louisiana and Alabama will all of a sudden turn blue. But the Democratic Party definitely should be looking at turnout in 2020 and then in future elections as to whether or not these states could actually be contested. Because I can guarantee it, the Democratic Party will probably be focusing a lot of efforts on states like Georgia compared to Wisconsin in future elections. Though I think that the Rust Belt states probably will still end up going for the Democrats for quite some time. This opens a pathway for a number of women and actually just people of color running for the Democratic nomination that could absolutely make these southern states very competitive. North Carolina and Florida, I would add on to the states that I could see being as a part of the future for the Democratic Party. I would also absolutely characterize Arizona as well. The Democratic Party, I honestly think will have New Mexico locked down for numerous elections. I think the GOP will probably carry Nebraska second and Maine second. I don't think there is too much needed to be focused on for the Democratic Party there. Obviously, if they win it, it's fine. It's one electoral vote in both districts, but it's not crucial, and it's not giving us a very good indicator of anything. It's pretty much just white voters and whether or not they decide to go back to the Republicans or flip to the Democratic Party. So Ohio and Iowa, I still think will go to Donald Trump on Election Day narrowly, but I'm not worrying about margins for this map. We're just talking about states that the Democrats, I think, should harp on for future elections. I think Nevada, I think the Republican Party will probably contest it in future elections. I do think that the Democrats will have a pretty strong hold on states like Nevada and Colorado, but I'm still going to say the Democratic Party with states that are growing in population definitely should be focusing on locking down these states, absolutely. So this is not an electoral college projection. I know if you skip to the end, you may be surprised to see South Carolina and Mississippi. I characterize these states as yellow states or target states just because I wanted to discuss the fact that the Democrats really should be looking at turnout in 2020 for how well they could possibly do in future elections. If minority turnout was at 100%, obviously that's something that will never happen, but if it was at 100%, Mississippi and South Carolina would be blue by those characterizations, at least on the 538 adjust for the 2016 election. That was based off 2012. So if we see a candidate that could drive up African-American turnout as well as Obama, Joe Biden could definitely do that. I know some people may not necessarily agree with that, but if you look at the data, definitely could. Hillary Clinton, she underperformed Obama in terms of black turnout by 7%, and that made all the difference. That made 10-point margins of a loss down to 19 in Mississippi, or a margin of victory of 7 in Wisconsin down to losing by 1. So these minority voters are crucial to the Democratic Party. And following this election, with an increase and influx of Democratic voters in a number of these states, the Democratic Party really should be focusing on all of the states that I've characterized in yellow. Obviously, I'm not an expert on demographic shifts across this country, but we definitely see a clear trend of the states that are becoming more Democrat and states that are becoming more Republican in the future. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. On your screen, there should be a video for my 2020 election predictions. You can go ahead and scroll through them. Not a video, a playlist. And on your screen, there should also be a video where it's just a video tailored towards your interest. Again, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you all later today.